pressure of the profit-driven marketplace grow greater, it becomes important that students of the healthcare professions be advised of the impact of these activities upon the proper professional care of their patients. Rather than bemoaning the new business orientation, the profession should be equipping themselves and their students with the necessary tools to meet the challenges of an increasing demanding public, including the challenge of maintaining both ethical standards and a sense of professionalism in a highly competitive environment. Much of what we have discussed in this paper has a relationship to limited healthcare resources. The rising need and demand for healthcare services by a growing and aging population places tremendous pressures on available healthcare resources. Rising demand in the presence of limited supply in the marketplace by nature results in increased prices for healthcare. The result of this phenomenon is seen by many to result in an unjust distribution of limited healthcare resources. In addition, financial resources utilized for healthcare take away from other societal needs, raising the need for expanded public health practices to reduce the demand for healthcare services, a topic I think will be addressed well tomorrow. It is important to note that conflicts of interest do not arise solely from financial incentives to practitioners. When research needs or practitioner fame is involved, the patient may likewise suffer from practitioner excesses in putting personal goals ahead of patient needs. In closing, to decide what could, would, or should be done when personal interests come into conflict with patient interests, the professions and the individual professionals should reflect upon and follow those values and obligations that place the patient's interests first. I thank you, and I would like to thank you.
On the question of time, I think there's time for one or possibly two comments or questions. I see a hand here, so we'll take that, and the second one here. Well, Wendy, as you're at the microphone, perhaps you'd like to first. Shall we take them both, one after the other, and then you wish to respond?
Wendy Rogers from Australia. Thanks very much for that. I guess my comment is more towards your conclusion that we should leave it up to individual practitioners to reflect on ethical practice. Whereas my experience with just trying to teach medical students about the conflicts of interest inherent in accepting gifts from the pharmaceutical industry has proved an uphill task. And so I guess I would put it to you, do you not think there's a more need for legislation in that professional regulation, I think, has failed both in Australia and in America from what we read, rather than leaving it up to just people doing the right thing. I think when the incentives are so high, that doesn't work.
Can I have a second comment, and then we'll allow Dr. Gilles.
Yes. Give me your comments, sir. In the last international surgery, a big surgery in the United States said that in the United States, the patients are abusing the medical ethics and malpractice law, as they had more than 200,000 cases against doctors, and the benefits goes for the lawyers. And the doctors are now victims in the United States. And he said to us, as a developing country, don't go and don't act as United States medical ethics and malpractice law. Thank you, sir.
Health professional students and then seeing them move out into the public and following their ethical requirements. And there may be a place for law to control some of these excesses, particularly with company incentives and things like that, but still we have to, in the long run, I believe, come down to individual ethics, and we must stress it and push it. To just behave because we're told to by law, the law sets the floor. It doesn't set or even come close, in my opinion, to addressing most ethical issues.
The new chair to come into the chair, I believe.
Actually, is Sora out here? Sorry. I think let's decide this. It's 10 minutes to 12, and we have the afternoon sessions scheduled currently at 1:15. I'd like to suggest we go for lunch now and start this session at 12:40. 12:45. Okay? Is that okay? 12:45 sharp. Because the time, you're all very hungry. Is that, do people think that's a good idea? Yes? Who says no? Who says yes? Consensus. Who says yes? Yes. Who's here by 12:45, please, we will start. And please, all the presenters, download your PowerPoints onto the computer and be ready to go at 12:45. Thank you.
Begin this section. So, a very pleasure to answer to the conference to let me to be a chairwoman. And this section about the different mode of health systems of patients. So we would like to learn something from Taiwan friends. So the first speaker is named Dai Zhizhan. His topic is on ethics and dynamic moral status among hospital patients and physicians. His physician graduate Institute of Humanities in Medicine, College of Medicine, Taipei Medical University, Taipei, Taiwan, China.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am an ENT surgeon and also an associate professor in health services management in China Medical University, Taiwan. I will start the first topic of the panel, dynamic moral status among hospital, patient, and physician. Most of the textbook will say there is no priority among those principles of medical ethics. The statement expresses the universal consideration in making ethical decisions. However, in a complicated clinical practice, the dilemma comes from choosing a proper principle has made physicians confused. Although we should not emphasize any single principle in facing our patients, it seems that different era has different principles. Let me begin with the slide to illustrate the different issue in different periods. The first principle came into medicine could be non-maleficence, which happened in 460 years before this, as the well-known do no harm by Hippocrates. Actually, a passive attitude was not satisfied with most of physicians, and definitely is not enough in treating our patients. Fatalism and a higher moral state of attitude were expected in physicians' training and practice. Physicians are taught to efface personal benefits to achieve patients' goods. Albert Schweitzer is the typical role model in physician training. Fatalism had guided physicians' practice in most of the past years until patients' autonomy was proposed in the middle period of 20th centuries. Nuremberg Code was believed to be the activator of autonomy. In 1973, the American Hospital Association proposed its patient bill of rights to illustrate how they will do to respect their patients' rights. In order to fulfill respectful autonomy, principle of fidelity, that telling the truth and keeping confidentiality was emphasized later. In the period, principle of autonomy has overtaken beneficence to be the mainstream in clinical practice. The first principle comes back in the end of 20th century, when the mentioned thousands of patients died in each year. The healthcare professions were certainly frustrated because after so many years' efforts, the issue of patient safety swept most of the countries. In the new century, due to the increasing healthcare demand and high cost of new technology, resource restraint, justice and distribution will be a top issue in our future practice. For physicians today, the four principles of medical ethics has been well established. They are asked to be as moral as possible in their practice. However, it is easy to find the conflicts in between, like beneficence versus patient's autonomy, non-maleficence versus patient's autonomy, and patient's autonomy versus justice, and so on. So in the clinical setting, the most frequent asked question is there any priority in the principle of medical ethics? Most times the answer is not. The conflict also comes from the value of profession and professionalism. Respect for life or respect for patient autonomy is not an easy decision in daily practice. Most physicians were asked, do patient choices always benefit to them? If the answer is positive, how come their decision change so frequently? Another dilemma is disclosure of information to patient always good to patient? In most cases it is, but probably not all. The relationships between physician and hospital definitely influence physician's practice. As a hospital employee, the dilemma is the balance between employees' loyalty and the professional ethical requirement. For hospitals, contract with the third-party payer, different methods has been proposed to implement the concept of managed care. Those methods are aiming to diminish unnecessary services. However, it is difficult to define what is necessary and what is not necessary. This is the change of reimbursement system of our national health insurance program. It shows the system moved from a retrospective payment system, means more freedom in providing service, to a prospective payment system, means cost down is the key issue in hospital management. Other dilemma is from the social obligation of physicians and the obligation to individual patient. If social obligation is inevitable to physician, thus we as a society really want to give this kind of power to physician. Hospitals certainly have their obligations to the society. They are expected to be service-driven, maximizing the community benefits, and have to protect the commonwealth. As a hospital administrator, he faces those dilemmas: profit or services, how many market share, resource allocation to proper cases. The most difficult thing in the healthcare society could be how to let patients know their social obligation beside their right to receive care. In the resource restraint era, patients need to respect others' right in receiving health care. As a physician, you should have to keep moving among the dynamic moral status among patient's family, hospital, third-party payer, and society. The decision is a dynamic movement. No definite guideline can be followed so far. It is taught in physicians training. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your presentation. I make an announcement. Our Taiwan friends would like to speak one by one. And after all the presentation is finished, things change the order from the third one to the one. So now the next speaker is Lui Xinyi. The title is Sociology, Lacking of Sufficient Institutional Support to Support Physicians in Confrontations with the Challenge Derived from the Public Health System Reform. Please introduce yourself.
I can't find where the file, yeah, where the Thank you. Okay, sorry about the little delay. My name is Xinyi Lu. I'm a cultural anthropologist teaching at National Zhongli University in Taiwan. And this presentation is actually a collaborative effort with Professor Tsai, who is a professor at Taipei Medical University. And unfortunately, he had to leave the day before yesterday for other obligations. So I would like to start with two anecdotes that illustrate the crisis of Taiwan's medical professionalism. The first anecdote was a street protest which involved tens of thousands of healthcare providers in Taiwan in 2004, and that was the first time that, because traditionally healthcare providers were considered cultural elite, and they did not feel the need to go on the street to demonstrate until 2004. And then the next year, there was another street protest on a similar scale. And then there was another incident which caught the national attention. It was called the Little Sister 2 Qiuqiaomei incident in 2005. This incident further shattered the societal confidence towards medical doctors. In this incident, a seriously injured girl was pinned down by 19 hospitals before she finally received the much-belated treatment. And the child died a couple of days after, and the incident caught wide national attention. And the bloodthirst media rushed to expose the so-called dark side of Taiwan's medical profession from this process. They blamed the doctors for lack of professionalism and the hospitals for putting profit before concerns over the patient's well-being. This incident greatly, as you can imagine, this incident greatly damaged the already eroded public trust in Taiwan's healthcare system. However, Little Sister 2's incident was only the tip of iceberg as to how the changes in healthcare delivery initiated by the global budgeting of the national health insurance have undermined Taiwan's medical professionalism. One of the doctors that, I'm just going to give you an example. One of the doctors that were charged negligence in this incident had 15 night evening rotations during that month. And so his overwork condition was typical for the young doctors in major hospitals. Therefore, many physicians expressed their frustration about the media reports in this incident. They argued that the deteriorating working environment and the conflicting demands on the doctors under the national health insurance are the main reasons as to why this tragedy occurred. Amid the heated debate, however, very little attention was directed towards the structural and cultural conditions wherein the crisis of Taiwan's medical professionalism emerged. This paper aims to provide a qualitative analysis. And these are our central arguments. In this presentation, we argue that A, to fully understand the challenges confronting Taiwan's medical professionals today, we need to take both global and local issues into consideration. And so globally, the increasing dependence on market forces and the rising costs from technological innovation are just happening. Locally, physicians in Taiwan are lapped on their own health insurances, peculiar mix of governmental interventionism and market ideology. Also, unlike most citizens in other industrialized countries, Taiwanese pay ability to the healthcare providers and the government. The integrity of their profession is still in its infant stage. I'm just going to give you a very brief description of Taiwan's national health insurance. Since its implementation in 1995, Taiwan's national health insurance has gained widespread international attention. For example, major U.S. newspapers have cited Taiwan's NHI as a sharp contrast to the notorious problem of lacking affordable health insurance for the U.S. population. Briefly speaking, Taiwan's NHI is a single-payer system with mandatory enrollment and low co-pays that is operated by the government but depends on market-driven incentives in this mix of public and private hospitals. So the NHI has made some really notable achievement over the past 10 years. In terms of access, 96% of Taiwanese population is insured under the NHI as compared to 57% before 1995. In terms of cost, the national health expenditure compared to GDP is one of the lowest in the industrialized world. I will show you a graph after. In terms of quality, while quality of service is difficult to measure in quantitative ways, surveys constantly show high approval rate of NHI from the Taiwanese population. For example, a 2004 survey conducted by the Department of Health indicated that over 80% of the people surveyed expressed satisfaction or high satisfaction with the NHI. This chart shows the national health expenditure compared to as a percentage of GDP. And in 2005, it was 19%, which is very low, as you can see from this chart, that Taiwan is one of the lowest, actually only slightly higher than South Korea, and much lower than other industrialized nations, such as the United States or Germany and Japan. Okay. So with such notable achievement, there is the dark side of the NHI. Taiwan's NHI was never really fully discussed. So to fully understand how some of the most contentious decisions were made, we need to put the NHI in the political context of the post-authoritarian Taiwan. Before 1995, national health insurance programs were restricted to 3 groups: governmental employees, members of officially endorsed labor union, and more recently, farmers. These programs cover about 57% of the national population. They were subsidized by the state, non-contributory, and viewed as a privilege and benefits to special groups, not as a risk-sharing mechanism as normally the case in industrialized countries. In other words, those prior healthcare programs were embedded in paternalistic thinking, wherein the government allocated state resources to its people in exchange for their loyalty. Therefore, there have been a prevalent sense of entitlement within at least half the population who perceived the NHI as a free handout, which resulted in a common misuse of medical resources. A good example was that in 2004, the citizens' consultation meeting was held in responding to the increasing financial crisis of the NHI. During that meeting, the participants concluded that, first, the NHI must continue. Second, the premium and co-payment cannot be raised. Third, the coverage and reimbursement cannot be reduced. Apparently, this impossible combination of low cost and high quality has put the whole healthcare system in a very tricky situation. So, with that historical background in mind, I should begin to examine the major problems of the NHI as they have induced severe negative effects on the medical professionals. The first structural problem of the NHI was that it was mainly a populist tool for the new administration that, unlike the previous authoritarian regime, was facing great challenges to its political legitimacy from within and outside its party. Therefore, it was in a rush to find ways to consolidate its power in the early 1990s, and what could have been more effective than a cheap, comprehensive national health insurance? Consequentially, the NHI was implemented in a hasty way. They did not even know for sure that the NHI was to be put into full involvement from the medical professionals. We can easily imagine why there has been so much contention and contradiction within the NHI system from its very beginning. Perhaps and market ideology, a conflicted public policy between socialism and capitalism, and the health insurance program with a social welfare agenda. On the other hand, the government set a strict cap on the rate, and at the same time, the Bureau of NHI had to take the financial responsibility in its own hands. As the next presenter will illustrate in more detail, the NHI has been in deficit since its first year. So, payment, the Bureau of NHI introduced the global budget system in 2002. Okay, I don't have time to go into detail in terms of how global budgeting operates. What I'd like to call your attention is that, as you can see, the central line is 1 point, which means that 100% of reimbursement from the NHI. And so as you can see, after 2002, the hospitals only got about 85% to 90% of the reimbursement, which means that which actually indicates the devaluation of the unit of medical service after the global budgeting system was implemented. And this also explains why those healthcare providers would go on street demonstrate global budgeting system. Another result is the polarization of medical care institution. So this green line is the middle level size hospitals, which has been on decline. Okay? And those 2 lines means a bigger size of hospitals. Okay? And this is the grassroots level clinics, small size clinics. And so the hospitals have been in polarization. The smaller ones and the bigger ones are the one benefit from the system, whereas the mid-level hospital. Okay, I'm just going to jump into what does this mean to Taiwan's medical profession. Okay. So as the hospitals, so the doctors are actually put on the front line in this cost control of hospitals. And what this resulted in Taiwan's medical professions are, first, branches that are considered high cost and high risk have difficulty recruiting young doctors. Okay. Second, various surveys show physicians decreasing satisfaction and increasing frustration with their working environment. And the major complaints include stress, long hours, salary, management disrespect, lack of trust from the patients and society. And there is another severe problem because in terms of the patient-physician relationship, because physicians are under the managerial pressure to forsake their traditional commitment to the primacy of patients' interests in pursuit for profit. Their fidelity of medicine's social contract is shattered, and patients' trust in them is gradually eroded. Thus, the number of medical-related lawsuits, blackmailing, and public threats have been on the rise, which put the physicians, particularly the ones in the high-risk departments into a more difficult situation. So this is a table that shows the desirability for the newly graduates from medical school. As you can see, the branches that are considered safer, like dermatology, they have like 5% of admission rate. Whereas the department that are considered high risk and high cost, like surgery, that they have a difficulty recruiting quality candidates. And this is the table of statistics from Taiwan Surgical Association. So you can see the number of applicants for surgical licensure are in constant decline. So what does this lead us to? The first conclusion that we would like to throw out is that the problems of Taiwan's NHI and the crisis of Taiwan's national health insurance are rooted in greater cultural and societal background and cannot or should not be handled solely by physicians. There was one slide that I did not have time to show you, was that in the Taiwanese culture there was a serious lacking of modern citizens' awareness in terms of being, citizenship includes obligation as well as responsibility. And because of some of the cultural factors rooted in Taiwanese society, that people tend to see the public domain as something that they only take but not give. And then, so in terms of physicians, we argue that physicians, there has been, as I said before, there has been a long tradition in Taiwan's physicians in terms of being the progressive force for Taiwan's democratization as well as social movement. So we argue that Taiwan's physicians have long been a significant and stabilizing force since the Japanese occupation. And so doctors should strengthen their collective awareness of this progressive tradition and become a progressive yet pragmatic force to facilitate political and cultural changes. Okay. The next one, we think that would be the important principle for the next step is engendering public trust. The core value of the medical profession resides in the trusting relationship between the doctor and the patient, not the profit generated from that interaction. Therefore, medical practitioners should not be governed by the logic of the market. And the last one, we think it's the fundamental problem that should be resolved, and that cannot be relied on physicians alone, is in terms of civil responsibility. So enlightened and responsible citizenship committed to democratic principles, including the awareness that health citizenship is both their right and responsibility. Okay. And doctors are no longer the authority figure that has absolute authority as well as absolute responsibility for the patient. Instead, doctors have the responsibility to empower the patient to be the autonomous, informed, and risk-sharing partner in the health care system. Okay. So thank you for your attention.
Response to the healthcare delivery system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen. Just bearing all those ethical code and also the cultural anthropological discussion of mine, here I'm trying to introduce some legal problems that we met, and many derived out of those so-called dark side effects. And first part, I would like to also highlight some of the important features about our problem and also especially its financial crisis and how it occurred. And here I try to avoid some duplication from my colleagues' presentation before. Basically, just like Professor Yu mentioned, and so far the insurance coverage has been a kind of extensive. And before this, almost 8 million Taiwanese people were not covered by any kind of public insurance program. So it's quite an achievement. And here is a little bit about the institutional frameworks of this program. So you can see that we have the committee set up to watch on the related administration works. And also we have the dispute settlement panel, and we have the certifying committee for the indemnity payment. And also we have the National Insurance Bureau in charge of the related administration works. It's normal basically. And sorry, this flowchart is in Chinese. And about the financial resources, basically this is a kind of the allocations for the financial resources for the program. Many here, 39% was paid by the insured, and 33% were covered by the participating institute as fee payment, and 28% the remand will be granted by the government. This kind of the financial chart is to some extent, at least to me, that the financial stability of the system is heavily reliant on the good citizenship, just like Professor Liu mentioned. It's a kind of the goodwill or the public good consent. But here, I'm afraid that we don't have this kind of the characteristics among our people. So we can tell why the problem we face right now, this is mainly because of the financial structure is not quite an appropriate one to fit the characteristic of your population. And yes, here we do have some achievement, and I try to avoid the reduplication. And here, the problem here is a harmony balanced financial conditions. Yeah, look back to the end of 2001. See here, the accumulated insurance fee has been about $54 billion. And here, the cost, you see, from this Taiwanese dollars figure is quite close. So this is the very initial stage of our program. And this has been the cost and the revenue formula. So you can tell the whole system has gone through the financial crisis ever since, because you cannot expect with a system to start its function with such a higher capacity being fulfilled. And this is the similar figure like Professor Liu mentioned to you. The red line has been the growth of the medical expenses, and the blue line is the growth of the insurance fee collected. Then you can tell what's going on here. And how the medical resources are used anyway. Here are some figures too. I just tried to drive your attention to this. The cost $1,100 for hospitalization. Thus, the reflection to what Professor Liu mentioned is below the average to those other OECD or newly industrialized countries. And it's quite low indeed. But the society wants the good quality services. And this kind of problem take Taiwan as a kind of society of socialism. Yeah, normally we don't think so. However, subject to the Supreme Court's interpretation number 472, it seems that, as it seems to me as a law profession, it's government's obligation to implement a social insurance system. And for the promotion of people's health, the public health industry and the public medical services shall be normally promoted. When it looks like a kind of observation of the, for the purpose of such an idealistic social welfare goal. And then what's going to happen? And especially on the other hand, the general public tend to temporary systems can never be sufficient to cover the comparative risk ratio. So we are going through a so-called program reform right now. The government tried very hard to cut down the cost, including the medicine and those caused by the so-called illegal conducts. And secondly, the government decided to set up the cap for medical services. And also the government tries to raise the insurance fee and strengthen the fee collection system. Yeah, just like I mentioned, all this works will face some kind of the, serious challenge from the social consensus. And who's going to take the risk in terms? When the government, once the government opened the low-cost access to the public and the financial condition of the program went soar, basically the Medicare delivery cap was placed for that, trying to mitigate the detriment. However, the medical institution might be able to allocate the resources rationally. However, the physician are left no room to find a balance between the moral, legal obligation to deliver Medicare and also in observing or fulfilling the employer's regulation on the allocation in response to the cap requirement. I'm going to explain this later on. And also, the participating institutes, normally the corporations, might not pay the insurance payment and or allocate insurance reserve as required by law. And when the institute went bankrupt, it becomes the government which should take the financial responsibility to fix the deficiency. And that's the situation we face right now. Now, the participating institutions are required to perform the duty of payment monthly. The government tried to fix the gap. However, to me, to some extent, the fee of the insurance remain. The count and control game will just continue and the problem can never be solved. And in such a kind of complicated situation or the environment or the regulatory environment, how a medical doctors face. Here, this is a very complicated figures. I don't mean to explain this in detail right now. I just try to figure out that here for these 4 spots, those are the 4 main stakeholders of the insurance program. And the participating institute is a kind of third-party insurance relationship with the insurer, but is obligated to pay in some way as a subsidy to the insurance program. Here is the insured and families, and here the contracting medicine, Medicare delivery institutions, and where are the physicians? Under here, under the Medicare delivery institutes. And here are some more relationships. Let's take a closer look here. Here, the insurance and the Medicare Institute is a kind of public law relationship about the special entrustment. And for this, between the insurer and the insured, is the normal insurance relationship. And for the participating institute and the insurer, Medicare relationship. Yes, most of these are the relationships that we are familiar with. However, take a look on this. All are different. And where are the physicians being imposed with, and I mean being spot, and how are their obligations being placed? I think that a physician faces a dilemma like this. It's the medical institutions, just like I mentioned, which should sign the agreement with the insurer, and the promise to maintain the required Medicare quality is the institution. Normally, the institute can ask the physician to observe and follow the internal regulation. However, how much time a physician has in satisfying the required insurance-related rules. And also, it becomes questionable if the violation of public insurance law can be deemed as a violation of Physician Act, because there is no way physician can say no to the institutions, and he or she has no direct legal relationship with the insurer. However, they've been asked to observe and fulfill whatever kind of the rules or the requirements set up by the insurer and also the Medicare institution. So let's take this violation case as an example. It's a case happened in Taiwan. Normally, there is some missing. Normally, a physician is not allowed to release a so-called long-term recipe without a diagnosis. However, there is a case in Taiwan. A physician was challenged by the Department of Health, saying he released the long-term recipe without diagnosis every time. But the institution or the hospital defend immediately, saying we have the public announcement posted to refrain a physician from doing so. But in the same hospital, there is the other announcement posted saying, for the convenience of the patient, a physician are encouraged to do so. That's the situation what the physician face right now, because they've been put in between. And just the same in the informed consent cases. According to the law, it's the medical institution should perform the informed consent obligation. However, normally, it's the physician even asked by the scholars to observe the duty. Could a physician do that without the hospital support? Because they have to take care of a lot of patients every day, and the science is evolving, and new questions come in. So who are going to support them? And yes, everybody looks for the quality Medicare service, but how is determination, and how about the impact direct out of new tech and very too few the support? How about the incomplete liability insurance coverage and the tough dispute settlement? Who's going to help the physician? So for the future, I just try to draw something on this. We need to take a close look on the deteriorative national health care systems right now. In Japan, healthy or ethical replication direct out of the technology development, like the biotech. And also, if we make the case to the extreme, who's going to explain to the patient about what's going to happen to the dolly? Yeah, 1 out of 277, that's a successful rate. What does that mean to the human being or humanity? Could a physician be eligible to explain to the patient for that? So if let's take a hypothetical case. If that's the patient want to take the gene therapy or maybe the stem cell related therapy in the future, is the physician obligated to explain to the patient for that? Okay, I think that we need to have more and or effective communication mechanisms among different stakeholders. And the impact of healthcare delivery system need to be further clarified. And we need to find a balance between ideological public goods and the reality of market-based trend. And also, a lot of things need to be done, like to be further defined, subject to the multi-layer regulatory framework created under the public health care delivery systems. And the convergence of international and domestic ethical norm also becomes critical to us. And we need to support a comprehensive and a multidisciplinary consultation mechanism. And I think those are things that need to be done. Anyway, I just try to share with you some of the experience that we've learned from the past National Health Insurance Program, which has been sort of provided under in Taiwan. And thanks for all your attention.
Thanks to you speakers. Now it's time to discussion and last questions. Please within 10 minutes.
In one of the graphs you have shown about payment, now I noticed that that of the Chinese medicine, traditional medicine, it went up in the middle very sharply and then again leveled off. It was low almost in the same baseline, shot up around maybe 2000 to 2002 or like that, and then again leveled off. Now, how do you explain it? It was quite interesting to see that.
I guess this question needs further investigation. I do not know, honestly, do not know the answer.
The figures means that the reimbursement rate change in a period means that the demand is less than the supply, so it can get more money. Because the demand is keep going up, right after that.
So, any comment on the questions? The other side all the time already be used. So thank you for our speakers and the audience. This is the end of this session.
A social legal study.
Good afternoon. I'm Anissa from the Faculty of Law, a legal person at the National University of Malaysia. My topic for today's presentation is Informed Consent in Malaysia, a Social Legal Study. The purpose of this research is actually to consider whether Malaysia recognizes patients' autonomy in the form of informed consent. The question here is, where should we place informed consent? Because we have to take into account the healthcare needs of society, the role of government in meeting healthcare needs, and the available resources which are actually scarce. So we have to prioritize among these. At this juncture, we have to critically evaluate whether patients' autonomy, in particular patients' rights, which incorporates the idea of informed consent rights, should be the priority in the Malaysian healthcare system. The other issue that I'm going to address here is, to what extent is the concept of informed consent being acknowledged and accepted by healthcare professionals, healthcare institutions, the legal mechanism, and the public, and is also comprised of the patients at large. Now, I'm looking at informed consent not in clinical trials, but from the aspect of medical decision making. In other words, when you treat patients, you obtain informed consent from them, and from what extent they really understand what the doctor is trying to say, and whether they consented to such operations or decisions that was made by the doctor. The methodology that I've been using, there are from two aspects: the documentary, that is more of literature review, but the other method, that is the fieldwork, which is more important here because it's more of a social perspective, looking at the patient's point of view with the whole process of informed consent. So I'm using the onlooker observation where the process of informed consent in a clinical setting where it took place without the patient's knowledge. I was there as an observer, looking from behind the scenes, looking at the way doctors and patients interact when they come up to the stage where the patient has to make the final decision whether they want to undergo an operation or not. And this is where I was there, but without the patient's knowledge. The other one is visiting and observing the setting, of course, would give an insight, interesting data, such as the reactions of patients when they communicate with doctors, and it supports the researchers' hypothesis that doctors are highly respected and that patients' attitude are more submissive and differential towards them. In Malaysia, it seems that doctors are looked upon as healers, although we have the modern attitude that they are subject to perhaps giving a faulty opinion or perhaps some information which is not quite accurate. However, the overall picture is that patients are very differential towards doctors. The other method that I've been using is the unstructured interviews, where this is actually informal conversation interviews. I didn't have any predetermined set of questions. Instead, researchers interviews, including myself, talk freely, asking many questions about their reactions after they know that they are suffering from some kind of diseases which need immediate attention or immediate surgery, and whether they allow the doctors to decide for themselves, or they wanted things their own way, so that some of them sometimes opt not to undergo this particular treatment, and they inform the doctor and they move out. They got themselves discharged and they seek traditional healers. But some do stay, and because of that I was there just to see the reactions and how the process of informed consent works in this field. Now, by looking at them and having face-to-face interviews with them, I will understand better the workings of medical paternalism. In other words, the patients really look up to the doctors. And in Malaysia, I can say that, I'm not saying it in the Asian region, but as far as Malaysia is concerned, the doctors usually have the final say as to whether the patients should undergo treatment or not. In most cases, the patients do allow doctors to make and decide. And this, I can see working, the workings of medical paternalism in clinical setting. Patients, in inpatients and outpatients in both the private and government hospital, and also conducted interviews with both senior and junior doctors to understand the dilemmas and the working constraints faced by them, because they are usually the employees in the government hospitals, and to understand informed consent and to see the working of it is not easy, especially when you've got only 5 to 10 minutes to attend to each patient. And there are 300 to 400 patients that they have to see every day, especially in public hospitals. The other methodology that I've been using is that documentary analysis, where I'm rather fortunate because the authorities, especially from the Ministry of Health and also from the hospitals, they give access to some confidential materials. And these sources, policy guidelines, secondary sources, including pamphlets, bulletins, do help in integrating behavior culture as far as informed consent goes in hospital setting. Now, findings. It is considered as a fact that the concept of informing patients of the nature and risk of treatment has been an ongoing process. In other words, we and the doctors, when I interviewed them, they understood what is meant by giving information to the patient. However, the amount of information disclosed is still very much dependent upon the doctors themselves. In cases where I interviewed them, they were saying that it depends on the education level of the patient. They will always try to give the best that they can when they communicate with patients. But in cases where patients leave everything to them, then they won't say much. They will only say that you don't have to worry, I'm only doing it for your own good, and it is better for you that you leave it to me, because after all, your interest is the number one. So this is particularly true in all aspects of negligence litigation, where the issue of informed consent comes out. In other words, patient was saying that they were not being informed, and then when things go wrong in the operation theater, when they will be injured and whatnot, and they sued the doctor. Now, according in 1996, what happened is that there's a case, a legal case of Sharon Paul-Raj, where it states that there is now argued that the emphasis is more towards achieving patient satisfaction rather than the doctors themselves, although they know there's a duty to inform patients, but it is more to do in line with what is the ISO, the international standards, that is acknowledging the fact that the patient is an individual position of achieving quality health care by upgrading services, reducing errors in medicine, rather than acknowledging patients' rights. That's another point. As such, although medical directives, policies exist pertaining to consent forms and obtaining consent from patients, the full implication of informed consent as part of patients' rights are still very much in its infancy. Public awareness and media reporting had caused many medical clinics to change their medical practices to be more consumer-friendly, but it is submitted that it is largely due to competitiveness amongst themselves. This is compounded with the fact that in a society where primary health care is the main thrust to achieve health for all, we want to get coverage, comprehensive coverage for everybody, so we have to prioritize among needs. In other words, upgrading services in terms of curative, preventive medicine becomes the main objective. So patients' rights, or for that matter, doctors' rights, is actually secondary. Conclusion, as it stands, patients' rights or doctors' rights for that matter are still insignificant as compared to that of attaining health for all or achieving quality health care. Viewed in this way, all the rights are no rights except privileges conferred at the pleasure of the powers that be. The only acknowledgement of patients' rights is through judicial pronouncement, through a few legal cases. Apart from that, the concept of informed consent, to my mind, will only be as part and parcel of quality patient care. That's all. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Nisa. And I think we have time for a couple of questions. Please go to the microphone. And
Culture, Pakistan. Thank you very much for an interesting paper. You mentioned this was an observational study, and you were observing patients who did not know that they were being observed. I'm not sure whether you were observing physicians who also did not know that they were being observed. Did you have ethical approval for this? It wasn't very clear. Now, you also mentioned that there was some confidential material that was handed over to you by the Ministry of Health. I was quite clear as to what that confidential material was, and whether the patients were aware of that confidential material, whether they were being identified or not, etc. So that's one thing that I wanted some clarity on. The other thing was that you mentioned that the final decision seems to be in the hands of the physicians in decision-making situation in your country, which may be true for many countries. Does the family ever have a role in this decision-making process? Because certainly the patient would have a role, but does the patient's family also come into play?
Yes. Hospitals to observe patients like an undercover agent. See? And the fact that after the observation, I go up to the doctor and inform him that I have looked at the process and these are my findings. And then from there, I come up with the interviews, and they are quite interested, and they are very willing to actually help me in that particular project. That's number one. Number two is on the question of the various policy that also the hospital authorities. Since I'm also part of this ethical committee, so most of the guidelines, procedures are actually within our means, and as long as it is being done for a project which is meant to upgrade the system, they are more than willing to help. So there's no question of contravening any official secrets and whatnot. The other point is on the family when it comes to making medical decisions. Of course, family plays a very depends on the patient. If the patient is considered incompetent, in other words, he was no longer able to make his own decisions, then of course the doctor in charge will call the immediate family, who is the most influential member of that family, to come along and then discuss with the doctor.